I bid you a grand rising. Bid you peace. And wish shalom upon each and every one of you. Sometimes it's better to sit back and just observe everything than it is to always try to be at the forefront of the conversation. The person who sits back and just listens learns more than the person who's always trying to interject themselves into the conversation. You know, they say all the news is fit to print. Yet I submit to you this morning that we don't hear the news anymore. We don't. Have you ever taken the time out to attempt to watch what they feed you now, which is nothing more than meaningless propaganda, which is overhyped regular stuff, or something that has absolutely nothing to do with your demographic or anything that's happening in your world? Well, let me at least show you what I'm talking about. This morning, I sat down and I watched one of the major networks. Just let them roll with their morning, flow to program you as you go through your day. If you remember, the Morning Mental used to do that for you, but they shut that down for a little while. So now you're back to listening to the propaganda, so to speak. What I find interesting is I actually sat there and I wrote down all of the topics that they covered within the first hour. This was an hour of nonstop news. These are the things that they talked about. And if you think this is news, think about not what they're talking about, but what they're not talking about. The first thing they talked about were the fact that foreigners were coming to the United States to get the vaccine. The second story they talked about was the Jazz Fest being canceled because of COVID-19, because people didn't have the vaccine. The next thing they talked about was the price of gasoline, that keeps us operating in these 18th century combustion engines when there are other forms of energy out there. We developed cell phones, but we're still riding around on 18th century combustion engines because it keeps people rich, because it keeps you burning gasoline. So they want to talk about the price of that which you have you enslaved to. Then they went on to talk about how some airlines are now mandating that all of their employees get vaccinated, the vaccine again. And then they went away for a commercial to try to sell you some pharmaceuticals that you don't need, along with the side effects. And, oh yeah, I got my mans out here, pots and pans. Anyway, hold on a second. Down. Good boy. You out here too. Yeah, we out here in the meadow, chilling. He breaking bread with me also. Y'all know who it is. I don't roll alone. But anyway, then they came back from the commercial, and the first thing they talked about was how the sister girl that's been getting dogged out for marrying the white prince overseas, who left the whole situation. Now the only thing they could think to talk about was the fact that her half brother said that she wasn't that smart. It was a story to diss the sister because he's going to be on some reality show. Then they went on to talk about a white woman who's worth $350 million. Y'all know old ass Dolly Parton, right? But what they didn't talk about was the fact that Rihanna is now worth $1 billion. They didn't talk about that. They even talked about the fact that it came out of Forbes magazine, but they didn't mention the fact that this white woman who's been around since I was born is only worth $350 million, but sister girl somehow has managed to make it all the way to $1 billion. They didn't mention her in the story at all. Then they jumped over to Dwayne Johnson's shower habits. They want to talk about whether or not the man take a shower. Then they talked about, y'all remember Trisha Campbell from Martin? Oh, she saw a bear in the store. Baby bear got in the store. Nothing groundbreaking there. Nobody got hurt. They tranquilized the bear. Then they talked about Walmart workers are getting a bonus. Then they talked about, watch this, the white man of the hour that's in trouble, Governor Cuomo, and his sexual harassment, and how they got criminal complaints filed and it doesn't look good, and white women coming all out. They talked about that, but then they made sure they came back and talked about R. Kelly's trial might be next month or next year or something like A. Have nothing to do with B, but let's dig into the black man too. Then they went away and they came back. Remember, this is all the news for you. They came back and they talked about how some church is getting all its members to be vaccinated. Then they talked about how Louisiana the governor is asking for prayer for all of the people who still have COVID and haven't gotten vaccinated yet. Y'all starting to see a pattern here. Then they jumped over to talk about how dirty the air was in Denver because there are wildfires that burn every year. So why is this something new? Then they came back and they talked about, yeah, these wildfires are burning 20 million acres in the middle of nowhere, which is, most people don't notice, but wildfires are part of nature's process. Hold on a second. Didn't I tell you to sit down? Down. We ain't gonna be chasing nobody today. Okay? Y'all gotta know that's my boy. Anyway, so then they went on to talk about, notice I'm giving you the news. This is what they told you today. They said, they talked about how hot it was. Normally. Everywhere. It's summertime. Then they went, I can't take it, y'all. I can't take it. They came back and they talked about the temperature. They tried to do the weather report across the nation. But the funny part about that was it was normal stuff. Then they switched up and they talked about these two guys that were stuck in an elevator. There was a flood outside. They was in an elevator. We ain't gonna get into that. Then they came back and they switched up this old white man is being honored for playing a sport that we excel in. They talked about putting somebody in the Hall of Fame and, you know, they had their joy, feel good. Then they came right back and talked about an old white man that should be in the goddamn retirement home. And they talked about how they were going to cancel their geriatric, what we got, Geritol, Absorbing Junior tour because of COVID. And then they ended with what some white woman did for her birthday party. That was the news. Now, y'all don't get me wrong. At no time did I find out anything about the geopolitical climate in any other country, not even in the United States. At no time did they talk about the issues that are still confronting us today, people coming out of the quarantine and trying to readjust with the unemployment, evictions, and they didn't talk about none of that. Matter of fact, they didn't talk about nothing that affects the black community at all. They didn't talk about matter of fact, anything that had melanin in it was dissed. They dissed Markle, they dissed Kelly, they dissed everybody. Anybody who got melanin, there was not one good story that they told that was relevant to us. Matter of fact, what's the point I'm making? And I'm gonna leave y'all with this morning. Unless we start telling our own stories, unless we start telling our own news, there'll be no news. They're showing you that you don't matter. Wake up call. Grandmaster Jay.